Julian Hart stood at the edge of the sprawling estate's grand terrace, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow over the meticulously manicured gardens below. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and fresh-cut grass, mingling with the distant hum of preparations echoing from the ornate ballroom inside. Crisp, tailored tuxedo clung perfectly to his frame, every detail of his appearance polished to the highest standard, just as he preferred his life, flawless, controlled, and impeccably curated. Behind him, the estate buzzed with a quiet frenzy. Staff moved with precision, arranging floral centerpieces of white orchids and pale pink peonies, while caterers adjusted the placement of crystal glassware on tables draped in ivory linens. The orchestra tuned their instruments in the corner, poised to fill the room with soft classical melodies once the evening commenced. This was no ordinary event. This was the celebration of Julian's ascent into a new chapter, a union not only between two people, but between two influential families. The Hart name, synonymous with success and power in the business world, was about to be cemented further through his impending marriage to Evelyn Sinclair. Julian's gaze drifted over the horizon, where the city skyline shimmered against the fading light, a testament to the empire he had built from scratch. From a modest startup in a cramped office to a multi-billion-dollar tech conglomerate, every milestone had been achieved through relentless ambition and calculated decisions. Yet, beneath the veneer of triumph, an unspoken tension gripped him, a quiet nagging at the edges of his carefully constructed reality. Wedding day jitters, perhaps, though what fluttered in his chest felt heavier than mere nerves. Evelyn emerged from the grand entrance, radiant in an elegant cream gown that hugged her slender silhouette. Her dark hair was swept into a sleek chignon, revealing delicate diamond earrings that sparkled with every movement. She smiled at him, a mixture of warmth and expectation shining in her eyes. "Julian, everything looks perfect. I'm so proud of you," she said softly, reaching out to squeeze his hand. He returned her smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's been a long road," he admitted, voice low. "But today it all feels surreal." Evelyn stepped closer, her presence grounding him momentarily. "You deserve this. All of it." Her words were meant to comfort, yet Julian felt the weight of them pressed down even more. Deserve? Had he truly earned this happiness? Or was it a fragile illusion perched atop the sacrifices and secrets he had buried deep? The estate itself was a monument to opulence. Marble columns rose like silent sentinels around the terrace, their glossy surfaces reflecting the setting sun. Inside, crystal chandeliers hung from frescoed ceilings, casting prisms of light onto polished oak floors. Every inch of the space spoke of wealth and refinement, a stage set for a narrative of success and celebration. But Julian's mind wandered beyond the grandeur, to shadows lurking in corners unseen. He thought of the countless boardroom battles, the late nights spent negotiating deals, and the personal relationships sacrificed at the altar of ambition. His parents' expectations echoed in his mind, a relentless demand for perfection, for legacy. They had molded him into the man he was today, disciplined, relentless, unyielding. Yet, amid their pride and approval, Julian felt a gnawing emptiness, as if a vital piece of himself had been left behind in pursuit of the future. A soft chime from his phone broke the reverie. He glanced down to see a message from his assistant confirming the arrival of the wedding guests and the final timing for the ceremony. The clock was ticking, and the world outside expected Julian Hart to embody the pinnacle of success and happiness. There was no room for doubt or hesitation. He took a slow breath, steadying himself against the swell of emotion threatening to overtake him. This day was not merely about the union with Evelyn, but a public declaration of the life he had built, a life that demanded admiration and envy. Yet beneath the polished exterior, the man standing on the terrace wrestled with a silent question. Was this truly the life he wanted, or merely the one he thought he should have? As the first guests began to arrive, dressed in their finest attire and exchanging polite greetings, Julian moved toward the grand staircase, offering practiced smiles and nods. The buzz of conversations filled the air, a tapestry of socialites, business magnates, and family members, all gathered for the spectacle. The crescendo of soft music rose as the orchestra began to play, signaling the approaching ceremony. Julian's eyes caught a glimpse of Evelyn chatting animatedly with her mother near the ballroom entrance, their laughter light and carefree. He envied that simplicity, that ease of belonging. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine the life ahead: charity galas, philanthropic ventures, shared successes. Yet, in the pit of his stomach, a flicker of doubt remained, persistent and unwelcome. He found refuge in a quiet corner near a large window overlooking the estate's rose garden, watching the petals sway gently in the evening breeze. The roses, like his life, were cultivated for beauty and admiration, yet beneath their surface lay thorns, hidden complexities that could prick and wound if ignored. Julian's phone buzzed again, this time with a brief text from his mother. Asterisk, we're so proud of you, Julian. Today, you shine for all of us. Asterisk, he typed a quick reply. Asterisk, thank you, mother. I won't let you down. Asterisk. But as he pocketed the device, his thoughts drifted to a past he rarely revisited, a chapter marked by choices that had shaped but also fractured him. The sacrifices made in silence, the relationships left unresolved. The man he was about to marry, the life he was poised to embrace, belonged to a world where appearances mattered above all else. Yet somewhere beneath the glittering surface, a part of Julian longed for something different, something real. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the terrace as the time for the ceremony drew near. Julian straightened his jacket, squared his shoulders, and took a final breath. The moment to step fully into this new life was at hand. But as the first strains of the wedding march began to swell from the orchestra, a subtle unease settled deep within him, a whisper that the day's perfection might soon be tested in ways he had never imagined. The soft murmur of voices and the elegant melodies of the string quartet filled the ballroom as Julian Hart prepared to take his place at the altar. The guests, a sea of shimmering gowns and tailored suits, whispered excited anticipation, their eyes fixed on the grand staircase where Evelyn was expected to appear. Julian's heart beat steadily, a practiced calm he had learned to summon in moments demanding composure. Yet beneath the surface, something shifted, a subtle tremor that unsettled the foundation of his carefully ordered world. His gaze drifted toward the entrance, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Then, through the ornate double doors, a figure emerged, a woman moving with purpose, her presence commanding immediate attention. Julian's breath caught. It was Vanessa, the woman whose memory had long been tucked away in the recesses of his mind, a chapter sealed shut by time and silence. But she was not alone. Trailing behind Vanessa was a teenage boy, tall and slender, with dark hair and eyes that mirrored Julian's own. The resemblance was unmistakable. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow, the chatter of the crowd fading into a distant hum. Julian's heart seized, a sudden, sharp pain slicing through the carefully maintained calm. The boy's face, so like his own, stirred a torrent of memories, fragments of laughter and arguments, promises made and broken, a past he had tried desperately to forget. Vanessa's eyes met his across the room, a flicker of acknowledgement passing between them, unspoken and electric. She held the boy's hand protectively, her posture guarded, yet resolute. Julian's mind raced, questions flooding in faster than he could process. Who was this boy? How had he come to be here, in this moment, standing on the brink of everything Julian thought he knew about his life? The room's atmosphere shifted subtly as a few guests noticed the unexpected arrival. Whispers rippled through the crowd, curiosity and surprise mingling with the strains of music. Julian's pulse thundered in his ears, every instinct telling him to step forward, to confront the truth that had suddenly materialized before him. Yet his body remained frozen, caught between disbelief and an overwhelming surge of emotion. Evelyn approached then, radiant as ever, her smile faltering slightly as she followed Julian's gaze. "Julian," she murmured, concern threading her voice. She followed his eyes to Vanessa and the boy, sensing the undercurrent of tension that rippled through the room. "Do you know them?" Julian struggled to form words. I didn't expect to see them," he managed, voice strained but steady. "Vanessa is someone from my past." The weight of his admission hung heavily between them, a fragile thread threatening to unravel the carefully woven fabric of his future. As Vanessa moved through the crowd, heads turned, guests exchanging glances laden with speculation. She approached cautiously, the boy still grasping her hand as if drawing strength from her presence. Julian's mind grappled with the impossible reality unfolding before him. The boy's features, the same sharp jawline, the same dark eyes, spoke of a connection he had never dared to imagine. When Vanessa finally stood before him, the room seemed to hold its breath. "Julian," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tension. "I didn't want to disrupt your day, but there are things you need to know." Her eyes flicked toward the boy, who stood silently beside her, watching Julian with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Julian swallowed hard, the carefully constructed walls of his world beginning to crumble. "Who is he?" The question escaped in a whisper, raw and urgent. Vanessa's gaze softened, a flicker of sorrow passing over her features. "He's your son, Julian. Our son." The words struck like a thunderclap, reverberating through Julian's chest. Time seemed to warp, the past and present colliding in an impossible convergence. He stared at the boy, the truth unfolding with a clarity that left no room for doubt. A lifetime of choices, of sacrifices and silences, suddenly bore a consequence he had never faced. The ballroom fell into a stunned silence. Guests shifted uncomfortably as the revelation settled over them like a heavy fog. Evelyn's hand tightened in his, a silent plea for explanation. Julian's mind raced, struggling to reconcile the man he had been with the father he was being called to become. Vanessa's voice broke through the stillness. "I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid of what it would mean for all of us." Her eyes searched his, seeking understanding, forgiveness, perhaps even acceptance. "He's been waiting to meet you." Julian felt the weight of years pressing down upon him. The secrets kept, the distance maintained. Memories of their time together flashed unbidden. Whispered promises in dimly lit rooms, the hope and fear mingled in stolen moments, and the eventual silence that had followed his departure. He had left, driven by ambition and a desire to build a future that did not include the vulnerabilities of his past. Now, confronted with the undeniable truth before him, he realized how incomplete his life had been. The boy, standing with quiet dignity despite the storms swirling around him, was a living testament to a history he had tried to erase. Julian's voice was barely audible. "Why now? Why here?" Vanessa's answer was measured, her tone tinged with both resolve and pain. "Because you need to know. Because he deserves to know his father. And because the life you're about to enter can't be built on half-truths." The room seemed to close in on Julian, the grandeur and celebration reduced to a backdrop for a reckoning he had never anticipated. The future he had envisioned with Evelyn, the image of success and stability, now shimmered with uncertainty. The boy stepped forward slightly, his eyes meeting Julian's with a tentative hope that pierced through the chaos. Julian's thoughts spiraled. Could he embrace this new reality without shattering the life he had meticulously crafted? Could he reconcile the man he had become with the father he was now asked to be? The answers eluded him, tangled in a web of emotions, guilt, fear, longing, and a flicker of something he had not felt in years, hope. Evelyn's gaze remained fixed on him, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. "Julian, what does this mean?" He looked at her, then back at Vanessa and the boy, the weight of his silence heavy in the air. The moment demanded truth, yet the path forward was obscured by uncertainty. All he knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. As the music faltered and the guests shifted uneasily, Julian felt the walls of his world crack open, exposing a vulnerability he had long denied. The past had arrived unbidden, bringing with it a son he never knew, and a choice that would define the rest of his life. The grand ballroom, once alive with the soft hum of elegant conversation and the gentle strains of a string quartet, now felt suffocatingly silent around Julian Hart. His mind raced, fragmented and chaotic, as the reality of Vanessa's revelation settled deep within him. The boy, his son, stood quietly beside her, his composed expression belying the storm of emotions Julian sensed beneath the surface. Julian's gaze flicked to Evelyn, whose eyes searched his face for answers. The warmth and certainty that had defined their relationship moments ago now seemed fragile, as if the ground beneath them had suddenly shifted. She reached out, her hand resting lightly on his arm, but Julian barely felt the touch. His thoughts twisted and turned, a tempest of disbelief, guilt, and a dawning sense of responsibility. "I need a moment," Julian said quietly, his voice strained as he stepped back from the small circle of onlookers that had formed around them. He moved toward a side corridor, the soft echoes of his footsteps swallowed by the marble floors. Outside the ballroom's grandeur, the world felt smaller, more intimate, and yet more daunting. Leaning against the cool stone wall, Julian closed his eyes, trying to steady the rapid beat of his heart. The boy's face haunted him, the same sharp jawline, the same dark eyes that mirrored his own. How had he never known? How had Vanessa kept this secret for so long? The questions battered him relentlessly, each one a reminder of the past he had tried to bury. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it, unwilling to face the barrage of messages and calls that awaited him. Instead, he let his mind drift back to the years that had passed, the choices made in pursuit of success, the relationships sacrificed, the silence that had grown between him and Vanessa. He had walked away, convinced that ambition demanded such sacrifices, convinced that some truths were better left undiscovered. But now, confronted with undeniable evidence, the carefully constructed walls of his life threatened to crumble. His thoughts turned to Evelyn, the woman who believed in the future they were about to build together. How could he reconcile this new reality with the promises he had made? The weight of his impending marriage pressed down on him, tangled with the sudden, overwhelming responsibility of fatherhood. Julian's breath hitched as a flood of memories surged forward. Late-night conversations with Vanessa, whispered hopes for a life that might have been, and the moment he chose to leave, believing it was the only path to the man he wanted to become. Had he been selfish? Had his ambition blinded him to what truly mattered? The corridor doors opened behind him, and Vanessa's voice softened. "Julian, I didn't come here to disrupt your life, but I couldn't stay silent anymore." She stepped closer, her eyes filled with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "He deserves to know you. We all do." Julian turned to face her, searching her expression for the answers he needed. "Why now? Why on my wedding day?" Vanessa hesitated, her gaze dropping briefly before meeting his again. "Because I was afraid you'd never be ready to face this. But today, with everything about to change for you, it felt like the only time left to tell you the truth." Julian's hands clenched into fists at his sides, the tension coiling within him like a spring. "All these years, why didn't you say anything before? Why keep him hidden?" "Protection," Vanessa replied quietly. "For him, for me, and for you. The life you wanted didn't have space for this reality, and I didn't want to destroy your future. But it's destroying mine now," Julian said, voice cracking. "I'm about to marry Evelyn. I have a life planned, a future I believed was solid." Vanessa nodded, understanding the magnitude of his turmoil. "I know, and I'm not asking you to figure this out right now. But you can't pretend this boy isn't part of your life any longer." Julian's mind reeled with the enormity of the decision ahead. The boy standing silently beside Vanessa was a living fragment of his past, a testament to choices made and consequences ignored. The man he had become was defined by control and certainty, yet this revelation plunged him into unfamiliar territory, uncertainty, vulnerability, and raw emotion. Returning to the ballroom, Julian found Evelyn waiting near the entrance, her expression guarded but patient. She stepped toward him, her voice gentle but firm. "Julian, I want to understand. But I need to know, what does this mean for us?" Julian looked into her eyes, searching for the words that could bridge the growing chasm between them. "I don't have the answers right now, but I know one thing. I can't move forward without facing this part of my life. I owe it to myself, to him, and to you, to be honest." Evelyn nodded slowly, the hurt in her eyes masked by a quiet strength. "Then we face it together. Whatever this means, I'm here." The room's atmosphere shifted as whispers resumed, the guests sensing the fragile tension hanging in the air. Julian felt the weight of their gazes but focused instead on the boy, his son, who had stepped forward, offering a tentative smile. It was a small gesture, but one that carried the promise of a connection yet to be forged. Julian's thoughts turned inward, wrestling with the implications of this newfound reality. His world, once so meticulously ordered, now felt chaotic and uncertain. Yet beneath the fear and confusion, a flicker of something unexpected took root, a desire to understand, to connect, and perhaps to heal. He glanced at Vanessa, who gave a subtle nod of encouragement, and then back to Evelyn, whose steady presence offered a beacon of hope amid the turmoil. The path ahead was unclear, fraught with challenges and difficult conversations, but Julian knew he could no longer ignore the truth. As the evening lights softened and the guests began to settle, Julian took a deep breath, ready to confront the tangled threads of his past and present. The man he was had been shaped by ambition and sacrifice, but the man he needed to become demanded something more: honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to embrace the unexpected. With renewed determination, Julian stepped forward, prepared to navigate the complexities of love, responsibility, and the fragile hope of redemption. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, he felt the stirring of something real beneath the polished surface, a chance to rebuild not just a life, but a legacy rooted in truth. Julian Hart sat across from Vanessa in a quiet corner of the estate's expansive library, the fading light from the tall windows casting long shadows over shelves lined with leather-bound volumes. The grand wedding plans had been set aside, eclipsed by the weight of the conversation unfolding between them. The once polished veneer of Julian's controlled life was now chipped, revealing raw edges he rarely allowed himself to see. Vanessa's eyes held a steady calm, but Julian could detect the undercurrent of emotion beneath her composed exterior. The boy, his son, was waiting just down the hall, a silent presence in the background of their fractured past. Julian's fingers drummed nervously on the heavy oak table as he searched for the right words, the ones that might bridge years of silence and misunderstanding. "I need to understand everything," Julian began, voice low and deliberate. "How long have you known? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I had no idea." Vanessa took a slow breath, her gaze steady. "I found out shortly after you left. It was a shock, Julian. A shock that changed everything. I wanted to tell you, but I was scared of how it would change your life, scared of losing you completely." Julian's mind reeled. The years that had slipped by unspoken, the moments lost to assumptions and fear. "I was building a life, Vanessa. I thought I was doing what was best for both of us. But I didn't know. I didn't know I had a son." She nodded, her expression softening. "I know. I tried to protect you from this, from the complications it would bring. But I see now that keeping the truth from you only made things harder." Julian's eyes darkened with regret. "What about him? Our son? He's been waiting all this time." Vanessa's voice faltered slightly. "Yes. He's grown up wondering, hoping. He's always known who you are, even if you didn't. And he's ready to meet you, if you're ready to meet him." The weight of her words pressed down on Julian, each one unraveling the carefully woven narrative he had believed. He thought of the boy he had seen earlier, standing quietly beside Vanessa, bearing a resemblance so striking it was impossible to deny. The boy's presence was a living testament to a past Julian had tried to close the door on. "How do I even begin to fix this?" Julian asked, the vulnerability in his voice surprising even himself. "I'm about to marry Evelyn. I have responsibilities, expectations. How do I bring this into the light without destroying everything?" Vanessa reached across the table, her hand brushing briefly against his. "You don't have to do it alone, Julian. None of us do. This is new for all of us. But honesty is the only way forward. Your son deserves that much, from you, from all of us." Silence settled between them, a heavy pause filled with the weight of unspoken truths. Julian's thoughts churned, memories of ambition and sacrifice clashing with the sudden, undeniable presence of fatherhood. The life he had planned felt fragile now, its foundation shaken by the realization that his past had birthed a future he had never anticipated. "I'm scared," Julian admitted, the confession slipping from his lips like a fragile thread. "Scared of losing everything, of failing him, of failing myself." Vanessa's smile was gentle, touched with empathy. "Fear is natural, but it doesn't have to control you. You can choose to be part of his life. You can choose to be honest with Evelyn. It won't be easy, but it will be real." Julian leaned back, the weight of the moment settling deep within. The man he had been, so driven, so focused on control, now had to confront the unpredictability of family and forgiveness. Yet beneath the uncertainty, a small spark of hope flickered. Perhaps this was the chance to rewrite the story he had once thought was set in stone. As the evening shadows lengthened, Julian felt the stirrings of resolve. The path ahead would demand courage and humility, but it also promised the possibility of connection and healing. He looked up at Vanessa, the woman who had carried this secret with him all these years, and saw not just a reminder of the past, but a partner in navigating the future. "I want to meet him," Julian said quietly, conviction threading through his voice. "I want to try." Vanessa's eyes brightened, relief and gratitude mingling in her expression. "He's waiting for you." The sound of footsteps echoed softly outside the library door, drawing their attention. Vanessa stood, reaching out to Julian with a steady hand. "It's time." Julian rose, heart pounding with anticipation and trepidation. As they stepped into the hallway, the boy appeared at the end, his gaze steady but cautious. In that moment, Julian saw not just the reflection of his own features, but the promise of a new beginning, a chance to face the past and embrace the future with honesty and hope. Julian stood alone in his study, the heavy mahogany door closed behind him, shutting out the distant murmur of wedding guests and the soft strains of classical music from the grand ballroom. The room, usually a refuge of order and control, now felt claustrophobic, filled with shadows that mirrored the turmoil gnawing at his chest. The weight of Vanessa's revelation pressed down on him, the undeniable truth of a son he had never known, a past he had tried to bury resurfacing with relentless force. He paced slowly, fingers brushing over the spines of leather-bound books lining the shelves, seeking grounding in the familiar. Yet, every step echoed the same question. How had he missed this? How had ambition blinded him so completely that he failed to see the life growing beyond his reach? The carefully constructed future he had envisioned, the wedding, the merging of two powerful families, the legacy he was poised to cement, now felt fragile, teetering on the edge of collapse. His mind raced back to moments long buried, stolen glances exchanged with Vanessa in a less complicated time, whispered promises drowned by distance and silence, the decision to walk away in pursuit of success, convinced it was the only path forward. He had believed that sacrifice was necessary, that some parts of life could be left behind without consequence. But now, confronted with the living proof of those choices, the cost was impossible to ignore. A soft knock at the door startled him. "Julian." Evelyn's voice was tentative, carrying a mixture of concern and uncertainty. He hesitated, then nodded, opening the door to reveal her standing there, radiant yet vulnerable, the weight of unspoken questions in her eyes. "I wanted to check on you," she said softly, stepping inside. "This day, it's not what any of us expected." Julian studied her, the woman who had stood by his side through years of ambition and success, now facing a truth that threatened to unravel their plans. "No," he admitted, voice rough with emotion. "It's not. And I'm not sure how to move forward." Evelyn approached, reaching out to touch his arm gently. "We don't have to have all the answers right now, but we can face this together." He looked into her eyes, searching for the hope she offered. "There's a son I never knew I had. A part of my past I thought was gone. And now it's here, demanding truth and responsibility." She nodded, her grip steady. "I want to understand. But I need you to be honest with me, about everything." Julian exhaled slowly, feeling the tight knot in his chest loosen just slightly. "I want to be honest. I want to do right by him, by you, by all of us. But I don't know where to begin." Evelyn's gaze softened. "We start with truth. And with time." The moment was fragile, but within it lay a seed of possibility. Julian realized that his carefully plotted path might need to bend, to accommodate the unexpected, to embrace vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness. Later that evening, Julian found himself alone once more, the estate's grand halls quieting as guests began to filter out, their whispered speculations lingering like ghosts. He pulled out his phone, hesitating before dialing Vanessa's number. The line connected, and her voice greeted him, a calm anchor in the storm. "I want to meet," he said simply. "I need to understand this part of my life. I need to meet him." There was a pause, then a soft affirmation. "He's waiting." The following day, Julian arrived at a small cafe nestled on the edge of the city, a far cry from the opulence of his usual world. Vanessa and the boy were already there, seated at a corner table bathed in warm morning light. The boy looked up as Julian approached, eyes meeting his with a mixture of curiosity and guarded hope. Julian extended a tentative hand. "I'm Julian." The boy hesitated, then shook it firmly. "I'm Lucas." For a moment, the years apart collapsed, replaced by an awkward but genuine connection. Julian studied Lucas's face, the familiar angles, the subtle expressions that mirrored his own, and felt a surge of emotion he hadn't anticipated. Vanessa watched quietly, her expression a blend of relief and cautious optimism. "Lucas has a lot of questions," she said softly. "And so do you." Julian nodded, the enormity of the moment settling over him. "I'm ready to answer them, and to ask some of my own." As the conversation unfolded, Julian listened intently, absorbing stories of Lucas's childhood, his interests, his hopes. The walls he had built around himself began to crumble, replaced by a tentative bridge toward understanding. In the days that followed, Julian's world shifted. He began carving out time to visit Lucas, to learn about the boy who was as much a part of him as the empire he had built. Each meeting was fraught with awkwardness and discovery, but also with moments of genuine connection, a shared laugh, an exchanged look, a silent understanding. Yet, the path was not without hardship. Julian grappled with guilt over years lost, fear of judgment from his family and peers, and the challenge of balancing this newfound responsibility with the life he had painstakingly crafted. Evelyn's support was steadfast but tested, as they navigated conversations laced with uncertainty and hope. Through it all, Julian found himself reevaluating what success truly meant. The accolades, the wealth, the status, all paled in comparison to the fragile but real bonds he was beginning to forge. The future remained uncertain, but for the first time, it held a promise not built on appearances, but on honesty and love. Standing in his study one evening, Julian looked out over the city skyline, the lights twinkling like distant stars. He thought of Lucas, of Evelyn, of Vanessa, and the tangled threads that now wove together his past and present. He whispered to the night, "I'm ready to try. For all of us." The quiet hum of the cafe wrapped around Julian as he sat across from Vanessa and Lucas, the early afternoon sun filtering softly through the large windows. The world outside bustled with its usual rhythm, but here, in this small corner, time seemed to slow, allowing space for something tentative and fragile to take root. Julian's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, nerves entwined with a cautious hope as he faced the two people who had reshaped his life in ways he was only beginning to understand. Lucas shifted in his seat, eyes flicking between Julian and Vanessa. The boy's posture was guarded, a mixture of curiosity and wariness etched into his features. Julian understood. This meeting was as new and uncertain for Lucas as it was for him. Years of questions and absence had created a chasm that neither could cross without effort and patience. Julian cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Lucas, I want you to know that I'm here because I want to be part of your life. I don't expect everything to be perfect or for us to have all the answers right away, but I'm willing to try, if you are." Lucas nodded slowly, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I have a lot of questions," he admitted, voice steady despite the vulnerability beneath. "I do too," Julian replied honestly, "and I'm ready to answer whatever you want to ask." Vanessa watched the exchange with a quiet, hopeful expression. "It's a start," she said softly. "For all of us." The conversation unfolded with a delicate balance of honesty and restraint. Lucas spoke of his life, his interests, his struggles, the moments he had dreamed of meeting his father. Julian listened, absorbing details that painted a picture of a young man both familiar and new. Each story, each question, chipped away at the walls Julian had built around himself, revealing a desire to connect that transcended years of absence. As the afternoon waned, the trio's dialogue deepened. Julian shared fragments of his own journey, the ambitions that had shaped him, the mistakes made along the way, the regrets that now weighed heavily. Vanessa's presence steadied the room, a bridge between past and present, while Lucas's tentative openness hinted at the possibility of healing. After hours passed, Julian stood to leave, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. "Thank you for this," he said quietly, "for giving me a chance." Vanessa smiled, a light of relief in her eyes. "This is just the beginning." Outside, Julian sank into the driver's seat of his car, the weight of the day settling over him. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and emotions yet to be navigated. But for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope, a belief that fractured pieces could be mended, that trust could be rebuilt. In the days that followed, Julian made it a priority to spend time with Lucas and Vanessa, weaving small moments into a larger tapestry of connection. They met for coffee, attended baseball games, and shared quiet dinners, each encounter a step toward understanding and acceptance. The process was slow, punctuated by awkward silences and tentative laughter, but progress was undeniable. Julian's relationship with Evelyn grew more complicated. He was honest with her about the emerging bond with Lucas, and while she struggled with feelings of betrayal and uncertainty, she remained committed to supporting him. Their conversations were raw and unfiltered, a testament to the fragile strength of their partnership. Family and colleagues, however, met the news with varying degrees of shock and judgment. Julian faced pointed questions and veiled criticisms, his reputation challenged by the revelation of a son born outside the life he had meticulously crafted. Yet, he stood firm, determined to honor his responsibilities despite the social upheaval. One afternoon, Julian sat with his mother in the drawing room of the family estate. The weight of generations pressed down on them both as they confronted the reality that threatened to disrupt the Hart legacy. "Why now, Julian?" his mother asked, voice tinged with disappointment. "Why bring this into the open when everything was finally in place?" Julian met her gaze, resolve hardening his features. "Because it's the truth, and it's part of my life. I won't build a future on lies." His mother's expression softened, a reluctant acceptance in her eyes. "Then you must be prepared for the consequences." Julian nodded, understanding the unspoken challenges ahead. But for the first time, he felt ready to face them, not as the perfect heir to a legacy, but as a man seeking honesty and connection. In the quiet moments between public appearances and family obligations, Julian found solace in the growing relationship with Lucas. Together, they navigated the complexities of trust and forgiveness, discovering shared passions and dreams that transcended years of separation. The journey was far from easy. There were setbacks and misunderstandings, moments of frustration and doubt. But each step forward was a testament to their willingness to embrace vulnerability and hope. As Julian stood on the terrace of his estate one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he reflected on the transformation underway. The man he had been, defined by ambition and control, was evolving into someone capable of embracing imperfection and love. He knew the road ahead would test him in ways he had never imagined. But with Vanessa and Lucas by his side, and Evelyn's cautious support, Julian felt the stirrings of a new beginning, one built not on appearances or expectations, but on truth, acceptance, and the possibility of family reborn. The grand ballroom was awash in soft candlelight, the glittering chandeliers casting a warm glow over the assembled guests dressed in their finest attire. The air buzzed with anticipation, whispers weaving through the crowd as Julian Hart prepared to take his place at the altar. The wedding was meant to be a celebration of new beginnings, a union of families, a merging of futures carefully planned and cultivated. Yet beneath the polished surface, an undercurrent of tension rippled through Julian's heart. As the orchestra began the familiar strains of the wedding march, Julian stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the expectant faces. Evelyn stood at the end of the aisle, radiant in her gown, her eyes shimmering with love and hope. But Julian's steps faltered as a sudden resolve took hold, a clarity born from the tumultuous weeks since Vanessa and Lucas had entered his life. He raised his hand, signaling for silence. The music stilled, and the murmurs of the guests faded into a heavy hush. All eyes turned toward him, the weight of their curiosity palpable. "I have something important to say," Julian began, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "Today was meant to mark the beginning of a new chapter in my life, a chapter of joy, commitment, and shared dreams." He paused, the words catching in his throat before he continued. "But before I can fully embrace that future, I must confront the truth of my past." A ripple of surprise swept through the crowd. Julian's gaze found Evelyn's, whose expression shifted from confusion to concern. He took a breath, steadying himself against the storm of emotions swirling within. "There is someone here I need you all to know about," someone who has been a part of my life, though until now, unknown to most. His eyes turned toward Vanessa and Lucas, standing quietly at the edge of the room. This young man is my son. Gasps and whispered exclamations echoed through the ballroom. Faces turned toward Lucas, whose posture remained composed despite the sudden spotlight. Vanessa's eyes were steady, a mixture of pride and apprehension. Julian's voice grew firmer, fueled by the conviction of his decision. I did not know of his existence until recently. The years of silence and absence are a burden I carry, but I refuse to let that silence define us. Today, I acknowledge him openly, and I commit to being a father. The room was a swirl of emotions: shock, curiosity, judgment, and, for some, admiration. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly as she stepped forward, her voice soft but resolute. Julian's honesty is difficult, but it is also brave. I stand by him as we navigate this new reality together. The guests exchanged glances, some nodding in acceptance, others visibly unsettled. Julian's parents sat in the front row, their expressions guarded but attentive. The legacy they had envisioned for their son was now irrevocably altered, yet the man before them demonstrated a courage that transcended societal expectations. Julian looked once more at Lucas, who met his gaze with a flicker of hope and trust. "This is not the life I imagined for any of us," Julian said quietly. "But it is the truth, and it is ours to embrace." As murmurs settled into a tentative silence, the orchestra resumed, the music swelling to envelop the room in a hopeful embrace. Julian stepped down from the altar and approached Lucas, reaching out his hand. The boy accepted it, a connection forged in the crucible of revelation and acceptance. The ceremony continued, transformed by the honesty that had shattered and reshaped it. Guests witnessed not just a union of two people, but the beginning of a new family, complex, imperfect, and real. Outside, the cool night air greeted Julian as he stepped onto the terrace, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. He exhaled deeply, the weight of the evening pressing upon him. Yet beneath the exhaustion lay a flicker of peace, a sense that the truth, though difficult, had set something free. Evelyn joined him, slipping her hand into his. "You were courageous tonight." Julian smiled, the promise of an uncertain but authentic future reflected in her eyes. "For the first time, I feel like I'm starting to live honestly." Together, they gazed out over the city, a skyline of endless possibilities, waiting to be shaped not by perfection, but by truth and love. The days following the wedding unfolded like a storm's aftermath, quiet yet charged with unsettled tension. Julian navigated the shifting landscape of his life with a mixture of determination and trepidation, the revelation of his son Lucas rippling through every corner of his world. The opulence and grandeur that once defined his existence now felt secondary to a deeper, more complicated reality. At the office, Julian's colleagues offered polite congratulations, their smiles sometimes tinged with thinly veiled judgment. Whispers followed him through the marble hallways, subtle glances exchanged behind raised glasses at boardroom meetings. The news had become the talk of the city's elite circles, a scandal wrapped in the sheen of high society. Yet Julian stood firm, refusing to let the murmurs derail his commitment to Lucas and the truth he had chosen to embrace. Home was a different battlefield. His parents, pillars of the Hart legacy, wrestled with disappointment and confusion. One evening, Julian found himself seated opposite his father in the study, the air thick with unspoken grievances. "You've changed the course of the family, Julian," his father said quietly, eyes shadowed with concern. "This isn't the life we envisioned." Julian met his father's gaze, the weight of expectation heavy but no longer suffocating. "It's the life I have to live, one built on honesty, not image." His father sighed, a mixture of resignation and reluctant respect in his expression. "Be prepared for the challenges ahead. Society is not kind to deviations from the norm." Outside those walls, Julian poured energy into building a relationship with Lucas, weaving the threads of connection through shared moments and conversations. They attended baseball games, explored museums, and navigated the awkward territory of learning each other's rhythms and quirks. Each encounter was a step toward healing, a fragile dance of trust and understanding. Vanessa remained a steady presence, her support unwavering as they co-parented with cautious hope. Their interactions balanced past grievances with newfound respect, each conversation a testament to their shared commitment to Lucas's well-being. Evelyn, though shaken by the upheaval, chose to stand by Julian. Their relationship deepened through late-night talks and moments of vulnerability, the fractures from the revelation slowly mending with patience and grace. She grappled with her own emotions, hurt, confusion, but also a willingness to embrace an imperfect but real love. Publicly, Julian faced the sting of judgment, a socialite's cold shoulder here, a business associate's raised eyebrow there. Invitations dwindled, and whispers grew louder. Yet, he refused to retreat into the safety of denial. Instead, he championed authenticity, using his platform to advocate for truth and acceptance, even when it meant standing alone. In quiet moments, Julian reflected on the transformation underway within himself. The relentless drive for perfection gave way to a deeper understanding of humanity's complexities. He found strength in vulnerability, courage in admitting mistakes, and hope in the possibility of redemption. One afternoon, Julian hosted a modest gathering at his estate, a small group of close friends and family who had chosen to support him despite the turbulence. The occasion was Lucas's birthday, a celebration not just of another year, but of the new bonds being forged. As laughter filled the room and Lucas blew out candles surrounded by loved ones, Julian felt a profound sense of peace. The path ahead remained uncertain, fraught with challenges and societal scrutiny, but for the first time, he embraced it with open arms. In the glow of that evening, Julian understood that true success was no longer measured by wealth or status, but by the authenticity of his relationships and the courage to live his truth. With Lucas, Vanessa, and Evelyn by his side, he stepped forward into a future defined not by expectation, but by love and acceptance. The morning sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Julian's penthouse office, casting a soft glow over the sleek surfaces and minimalist decor. Julian sat behind the polished desk, a leather-bound folder open before him, his fingers tapping rhythmically as he reviewed the plans laid out within. But his mind was only half on the documents. The other half was consumed by the convergence of his personal and professional worlds. The boardroom was scheduled to convene in an hour to discuss the upcoming launch of a new philanthropic initiative, one Julian had conceived in partnership with Vanessa. The project aimed to provide mentorship and resources to underprivileged youth, a cause close to both their hearts and a tangible symbol of the evolving family they were building together. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Vanessa entered, her presence a comforting contrast to the sterile environment. She carried a folder of her own, eyes bright with a mixture of determination and hope. "Ready for the meeting?" she asked. Julian smiled, standing to greet her. "More than ever. This feels different, like more than just business." Vanessa nodded, stepping closer. "It is. It's about legacy. Ours doesn't have to be defined by old expectations. We can shape something new." Together, they entered the boardroom, where executives and advisors gathered, their faces a blend of curiosity and cautious optimism. Julian took his place at the head of the table, the weight of leadership settling comfortably on his shoulders. He began by outlining the vision, a program that combined education, mentorship, and community engagement to empower the next generation. As the discussion unfolded, Julian and Vanessa navigated questions and concerns with transparency and conviction. Their partnership, forged through shared history and renewed trust, lent authenticity to the initiative. The room gradually shifted from skepticism to enthusiasm, the project gaining momentum as a beacon of positive change. Outside the corporate sphere, Julian's personal life continued to evolve with equal complexity. He stood firm against familial pressures that sought to confine him to traditional roles and expectations. At a recent family gathering, his mother's disapproval was palpable. "You're choosing a difficult path, Julian," she remarked, her tone laced with both caution and sorrow. "But if this is truly who you are now, then you must own it." Her words, though tinged with regret, carried a reluctant respect that Julian accepted. "I am," he replied, "and I intend to live it fully." With Vanessa and Lucas by his side, Julian embraced the challenges of co-parenting and blending their lives. They navigated school meetings, family dinners, and weekend outings, each experience weaving the fabric of their new family unit. Lucas flourished under Julian's attentive guidance, their bond deepening with every shared moment. Evelyn remained a steady presence as well, her support unwavering despite the complexities of their situation. Their relationship matured into one built on honest communication and mutual respect, evolving beyond the initial shock to a partnership grounded in understanding. Julian also confronted societal judgments head-on, using his platform to advocate for acceptance and authenticity. He spoke publicly about his journey, the struggles and revelations that had reshaped his life. His candor resonated with many, inspiring conversations about family, identity, and the courage to embrace truth. One evening, as Julian prepared for a keynote speech at a major conference, Vanessa joined him backstage. They exchanged a quiet smile, the unspoken acknowledgement of how far they had come together. "You're ready," Vanessa said softly. Julian nodded, taking a deep breath. "Because this isn't just about me anymore. It's about all of us." The speech that followed was met with standing ovations and heartfelt applause. Julian spoke not only as a successful entrepreneur, but as a man transformed by love, responsibility, and the power of honesty. His message was clear: legacy is not defined by perfection, but by the authenticity and courage to face life's complexities head-on. In the weeks that followed, the philanthropic project gained traction, attracting partnerships and funding that promised to make a meaningful impact. Julian and Vanessa worked tirelessly, their collaboration a testament to the strength born from vulnerability and shared purpose. As the seasons changed, Julian found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here, a path marked by revelations, challenges, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. The man who once sought to build a life of flawless appearances had evolved into someone who embraced imperfection and found strength in connection. Standing on the terrace one evening, overlooking the city's skyline ablaze with lights, Julian felt a profound sense of peace. Beside him, Lucas laughed as he recounted a story from school, and Vanessa smiled, her hand resting lightly on Julian's arm. The future remained uncertain, but it was theirs to shape, rooted in honesty, love, and the courage to redefine what family truly meant. The afternoon sun filtered softly through the tall windows of the intimate gathering room, casting a warm glow over the faces of close friends and family seated in a semicircle around the birthday cake. Laughter and quiet chatter filled the space, a stark contrast to the grand, formal celebrations that once defined Julian Hart's life. This was different, smaller, more genuine. A celebration not just of another year for Lucas, but of the fragile, beautiful family they had begun to build. Julian stood beside Lucas, watching as the boy's eyes sparkled with excitement, fingers poised to blow out the candles atop the cake decorated with stars and baseball motifs. Vanessa stood nearby, her smile radiant but tinged with the quiet strength that had carried them through years of uncertainty. Evelyn, seated across the room, observed with a mixture of warmth and reflection, her presence a testament to the evolving bonds that had grown from honesty and acceptance. "Make a wish," Julian encouraged softly, his voice low but steady. Lucas closed his eyes briefly before exhaling, extinguishing the flames in a single breath. Cheers and applause erupted, wrapping the moment in a cocoon of love and hope. Julian's heart swelled with a profound sense of peace as he reached out to ruffle Lucas's hair, the connection between them a living testament to the journey they had undertaken together. The room settled into easy conversation, stories flowing like a gentle river as guests shared memories and dreams. Julian found himself seated beside Vanessa, their hands brushing occasionally, a silent acknowledgement of the partnership they had forged, not just as co-parents, but as two people who had learned to navigate the complexities of love and forgiveness. Evelyn joined them, her eyes bright with emotion. This feels right," she said softly. "Not perfect, but real." Julian nodded, the weight of years of secrecy and sacrifice lifting from his shoulders. Real is what matters most. As the afternoon light waned, Julian rose to address the group, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man transformed by experience. "I want to thank all of you for being here today," he began. "For accepting the truth, for supporting us, and for helping build a family that wasn't always easy but is ours to cherish. He glanced at Lucas, whose smile was unguarded and genuine. This day, this celebration, is more than a birthday. It's a symbol of healing, acceptance, and the courage to embrace life's unexpected paths. The guests responded with warm applause, their faces reflecting a shared understanding of the journey's significance. Julian's gaze swept the room, lingering on each person whose presence had become part of the fabric of his new reality. Later, as the gathering dispersed, Julian lingered by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. Vanessa stepped beside him, her presence a comforting anchor. "Look how far we've come," she murmured. Julian smiled, the edges of his lips lifting with a tenderness born from hard-won peace. "And there's still so much ahead." They stood together in companionable silence, the future stretching before them, a canvas waiting to be filled with the colors of truth, love, and resilience. In that quiet moment, Julian understood that legacy was not a monument to perfection or status, but a living, breathing connection forged through honesty and the willingness to embrace life's complexities. With Lucas, Vanessa, and Evelyn by his side, he stepped forward into a future not defined by past mistakes, but illuminated by the promise of new beginnings. If you love the story, like the video and subscribe.